What's up guys, welcome to new Unreal Engine 5 tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to create your first Unreal Engine 5 game. This video will cover everything that you will need. At the end of the tutorial, you will have a complete game with many features and mechanics, such as a player character, enemy AIs, a dash ability, coins to pick up, a map, and much more. If you are a beginner starting to learn Unreal, this video will be perfect for you. And just to give you an idea of who I am, I'm one of the top Unreal Engine instructors on YouTube, with one of the biggest Unreal Engine communities out there. I've created games that have tens of thousands of downloads and millions of views. For example, one of my games got over 3 million views in just one day. And I Show Speed, the biggest streamer in the world with over 30 million followers, played it live on stream.
Chat, I heard this game is like one of the best games out right now. So let's see how it is, bro.
So trust me when I say you're about to learn from one of the best. It's going to be a very easy video to follow, so let's get started. Alright, so the first thing that we need to do is create a new Unreal Engine project. In this case, I am going to be using the latest version, which is 5.5, and I do recommend that you use the same version as me or above. With that said, let's select the game section and the third person template. The third person template will be a great starting point for learning and creating our game, because it will already include a functional character movement. Then let's make sure that we have blueprint selected, and under target platform, let's select desktop. Quality preset will depend on your hardware. In this case, I am going to leave it on maximum, and then started content, we can leave this enabled because it will include some nice models that we can work with to start with. And then select a prior location and fill in the name. And with that done, we can go ahead and hit create. And there we go, we have our new project created. So, as you can see, there's a lot of buttons, a lot of icons, and a lot of stuff. So, let's go ahead and see how we can navigate through the Unreal Engine interface. So, as you can see, the main thing on our screen is our viewport, which renders our level. And on here, we can see the whole world. So, if we go ahead and hold the right mouse button on top of the viewport, we can go ahead and turn our camera. And on top of that, while holding the right mouse button, we can go ahead and start to move with the WASD keys. And just go ahead and move around like a drone, like if we were playing a game inside of Unreal. As simple as that. So remember, right mouse button and the WASD keys. Now in our viewport, we can also go ahead and select different actors. Now actors are objects, okay? And we can essentially go ahead and select this one, for example, and we have a nice outline and this icon over here. We can use these arrows to essentially go ahead and move this actor in our level. Now we are not limited to only movement, because up over here, as you can see in this section of the screen, we have a lot of different tools and parameters. So for example, we can switch into the rotation mode and this icon's changed. And now what I can do is rotate the object in this axis instead of going ahead and moving it. The same goes with the scaling. I can select this and change the scale of this object along this axis, as you can see. So on top of that, we can also go ahead and turn on snapping for the rotation, for our movement, and for the scaling, and also change the camera speed of our viewport. Cool, so now you can go ahead and move around in your level, and also go ahead and select different actors, move them around, and change their properties. So next up we have the outliner. The outliner is essentially the list of actors in your level. So whatever actor you want to find, it will be here if it's in your level. So for instance, let's say that you're trying to go ahead and access the player start. So you don't need to go into the viewport and start to look for the player start, which is here. You can simply go to outliner and search for player start, and there we go. You can go ahead and select this, okay? So it's very useful when dealing with bigger levels. And make sure that you have everything, of course, organized in folders, so it'll be even easier to find stuff. Next up we have the details panel. As you can see right now, it's empty. This is because it only displays the parameters of a selected object. So if I go ahead and select this actor, for example, as you can see, we have all of these parameters filled up, with the location, rotation, and scale of this actor in this level, the static mesh model, the materials, and so on. So this is quite important. In this section over here, you can go ahead and change all about the object or actor that you have selected. So for example, the scale could also be changed from here. The static mesh could be, for example, this, and the material could be whatever else, right? So this is quite important when customizing your actors in the level. Next up, we have the content drawer or content browser. So as you can see, we have this big button on the bottom of the screen. If I click on this, this panel opens up. And this is essentially your library for this project. In this panel over here, you will find all of the assets that you have imported in this project. And of course, it will be organized in folders. So for example, if I wanted to find the character models, I could go to the characters folder, mannequins, meshes, and here we go. We have all of the characters. Now, one thing that I always like to do with the content browser is to click on dock in layout. If I click this, as you can see, this pops up, and now I can simply go ahead and drag this tab to the bottom of the screen, and there we go. It's always attached and ready to be used. And let me just make this a bit smaller, and boom. I always like to have it over here because I always are using this content browser to drag things to a level or create new items. So yes, when we right click, we can go ahead and create new assets. For example, a new blueprint, a new level, a new material, and so on with a ton of different asset types. Now, how can we go ahead and drag new actors to our level? Well, we can go to, for example, level prototyping, meshes, and just drag one of these assets to the level. That's how easy it is. And now, of course, with the tools that I just showed, you can go ahead and start to move this around and change how it looks. Now, a quick tip about the content browser is to keep it very organized from the start. So make sure that you go ahead and split everything into different folders and it's all very well laid out. That way it will be easy for you to go ahead and develop your game. But the skill of organizing your project will be acquired by just playing around with your game. So you will see how this process will be way easier as we go with the tutorial and overall developing your games. And last but not least, we have the play mode options. So if we hit this big green button, we enter in play mode. And if I just click on here, I enter in the play mode and I can go ahead and play my game. And as you can see, this is super cool. And I can just go ahead and move around and just push these cubes and just play my game. And then when I press escape, I quit and I'm back in my render mode. Now when you press play, you can also press F8 and you eject and therefore have your mouse, and you can go ahead and change stuff while you are in play mode. Just have in mind that if you change stuff while you are in play mode, when you stop playing, they will reset back to normal. So for example, if I got this cube and moved it to here, right, when I click this button to go back to my play mode, as you can see, it moved. But when I press escape, it goes back to normal. Alright, so there we go. Now you should be able to go ahead and move around your viewport, select actors, move them around, and change their properties. Like for example, the material, I could go ahead and put in this blue one. There we go. As you can see, super easy to customize things, right? But of course, it is time to begin creating our game for this tutorial. So if we press play, as you can see, we have this character movement, which works really cool. But the character right now is the default mannequin from Unreal Engine. So let's go ahead and import our custom model and custom animations. So what I am going to do is leave a link in the description where you can download all of the resources that we will be using in this tutorial. So it will be a zip file, so simply unzip that file and then open up the folder and you can access all of the models and everything. So in the content browser, let's open up the characters folder, and right over here, let's right click and create a new folder. And let's call this villager and open up this new folder. So in here is where we're gonna go ahead and import the new model, animations, and textures. So let's open up the folder that I will leave in the resources and open up the player character folder. And as you can see, we have an FBX, which is essentially the player model. So simply select this and drag this to the content browser. And as you can see, a new window will pop up with all of the configuration for the import. Now in this case, let's leave everything by default, so do not change anything. The only thing that we need to make sure is that under the common scale to meshes and animations, import only animations is disabled, and the skeleton is set to none. With that said, click on import, and boom, as you can see, we have the new characters. Now we have some issues. This is because the textures did not import, as you can see. This is simply because we need to go ahead and import them separately. So let's go ahead and open up once again the folder, and as you can see, I also left the textures. So simply just drag them into the content browser, and there we go. We have a new folder with the 2 textures, which is just great. So now the only thing left to do is to apply these textures to the materials that have been automatically created. So let's double click to open up Embody and start to apply this texture. Now, the material editor in Unreal is really nice because it works with nodes. That means that any beginner can pretty much pick up the basics pretty fast. So as you can see, we have this output node, and this will essentially go ahead and have the base color, the metallic, specular, roughness, and all the properties on how the material output will look. So in this case, we simply need to drag the texture to the base color, which is how it looks. So let's right click to add a new node and search for texture sample. And simply click on this. And as you can see, when we select this node, the details panel, as you might remember, fills in with all of the properties of what I'm selecting. And in this case, we can go ahead and select a texture. So let's go ahead and find the villager texture, which is going to be just simply T-villager, the one with the colors. And then simply drag the RGB, which are all the colors, to the base color. And boom, if I apply and save, as you can see, the villager now has all the colors and everything like that, which is really cool. But we are missing one important step, which is to add also the specular, roughness, metallic, and all of this stuff to make sure that the material will behave correctly with lighting and so on. So this is pretty straightforward. We're gonna simply right click and add another texture sample. And for this texture sample, let's select the other texture that we have for the villager, which is MRSS, okay? And simply we can connect the red output into the metallic and the green output to the roughness. And boom, that's it. Now the character will have more of a, as you can see, plasticky look, which is really, really cool. And yes, this texture on these 2 channels contains the information for metallic and roughness. Now this is not the case for every texture that you will use in your game. Probably you will have different textures for each property, but in this case Unreal made it very efficient. And yes, by the way, I'm using a Unreal Engine project sample character, which is called crop out, okay, if you want to check that out. So boom, make sure to apply and save the texture, close this, and now we have our character, but of course it's not where we want it to be, right? We want to replace it with our mannequin. So let's go to the content folder and open up third person, blueprints, and boom, we have this third person character blueprint. Now, blueprints in Unreal mean 2 different things. The first one are the actual nodes, which you might know as blueprints, okay, which are the code and all the logic. But we also have blueprint classes. In this case, the third person character blueprint is indeed a blueprint class. So double click to open this up. And when we open this up, we have the event graph tab, which is essentially what you might know as blueprints, which are, you know, all the nodes and so on. But additionally, we also have the viewport tab with a lot of components, and as you can see, a mesh, a camera, and so on. So blueprint classes can also contain, you know, components apart from directly nodes and logic. So make sure that you know the difference about the 2, okay? So in this case, if we go to the viewport, we can simply select the mesh component in this blueprint, and as you can see, we have a details panel. So we scroll down, we can see the skeletal mesh asset, and we can simply change this to be our villager. And boom, things break. Why? Well, this is because it's using other animations for the other skeletons. So yes, the mannequin and this villager uses different skeletons, okay, which is how the character is built and rigged for animations. So simply in the anim class, click on the X, and if you compile, this thing will go back to normal. Now we will see what an anim class is in a second, but now when I press play, as you can see, we are just kinda walking around with our new character, which is cool, but of course the animations are still not there. So now it is time to add our animations. So you can go ahead and find the animations once again in the resources folder. As you can see, under player character we have animations and we have a bunch of different animations. So before we go ahead and drag them into our project, let's go ahead and once again create a new folder. So under characters, let's open up villager, and right over here let's right click and create a new folder. Let's call this animations. And now, yes, inside of this new folder, we can go ahead and select all of the animations and drag them in. So make sure that you leave everything by default except two different fields, which is to import only animations, and then the skeleton. This is very important. Make sure that you select the villager. That way it will know on what skeleton to import the animations. And with that done, we can click on import, and boom, we have all of the cool animations. And if I go ahead and double click to open them up, you can see that they work perfectly fine, which is really cool. Alright, so now that we have all the animations that we need imported in our project, it is time to use them in our player movement. So first of all, let's go ahead and select this skeleton mesh that we added earlier for testing the materials and delete it because we don't need that anymore. We go ahead and spawn our player when we press play. And now, yes, it's time to create our first animation asset. So inside of the animation section, let's right click and go inside of the animation section. And right over here, as you can see, we have a bunch of assets that we can create from. In this case, we want to create a blend space. Now you see that we have a blend space over here, but there's actually a simpler version which will be way easier to start with. So if we scroll down to legacy, we can find blend space 1D. Select this, and over here we need to pick the skeleton, which in this case, as you might know, we're going to be using skeleton mesh of villager. Select this and rename this to be something as villager underscore blend space 1D and open this up. There we go. So what is a blend space? Well, a blend space is an animation asset that will enable us to transition between different animations depending on the player's speed. So if we are not moving, therefore our speed is 0, we will play an idle animation. But if we are moving, therefore our speed is greater than 0, we can play a walking animation or even a running animation, depending on our speed values. And this is all controlled in this timeline across this horizontal axis. And that's why we chose the one directional approach, because it only contains one axis, not two, which will include a vertical axis, which is, complicated things, but that we don't need right now, okay? So in the asset details, we need to configure this horizontal axis with the values that we want to have. In this case, the name of this axis will be speed, as that's the parameter that we want to control in the blend space. Now for the minimum, this will be 0, and then for the maximum, well, it will be the maximum speed. Now how do we find out what's the maximum speed of our character? Well, we can simply go back to the content browser, go to content, third person, blueprints, and open up our third person character blueprint. And right on the components section, if we scroll down, we can see a character movement component. And if we select this in the details panel, we can scroll down and find this value, which is max walk speed, and it's set to 500. So our speed will be 500 for a maximum value of this axis. And that's it. This timeline will now go from 0 to 500. So this means that now in the asset browser, I can find all of the animations for our player. So we can drag the idle and put this idle in place. Right now, this idle is with the speed of 177. Well, that's not correct. We want to play the idle animation when the speed is 0. So I can simply drag this all to the left to where the speed is 0, as you can see. And now I can get the walk animation and put this to the end where the speed is 500. And now if I hold left control over this timeline and move my mouse around, you can see that as the speed increases, we transition into the walking. And it's super cool, as you can see, and we will get a very smooth transition. It's gonna be very easy to play around with. So with that said, we can save, close, and go back to our animations folder. Alright, cool. So now how can we go ahead and use this blend space in our character? Well, for that, we need to go ahead and create an animation blueprint. So yes, there's also blueprints for animations. So in this folder, let's right click, go to animation, and create a new animation blueprint. And here once again, we have to find a specific skeleton, which will be our villager. Hit create, and let's name this ABP_villager. And boom. So let's double click to open up this new animation blueprint, and boom, we find ourselves with the anim graph. Now, once again, animations in Unreal are super cool because are done with nodes, which is really nice for all types of developers. So in this case, as you can see, we have this graph over here with a node, and this is the output pose. This means that whatever is fed into this node will be what is displayed in our character animation, right? So if I was to literally just go in the asset browser and drag the walk animation and plug this in, if I compile and use this, we will only see the walk animation. Now it stopped because this node is not set to loop, but if I was to set this to loop in the details panel, it will continuously walk. And I mean, this could technically work, right? We will literally just have a looping walking animation, and that will be our output pose. And then we could use this in the third person, but of course we are going to use our blend space. But before we use our blend space, let's see how we can apply this animation blueprint to our character blueprint, because right now it still doesn't go ahead and work. So let's go to content, third person, blueprints, and open up our third person character blueprint. And if we go to the viewport and select our mesh, we can see the anim class, and this is what we previously deleted with the X over here. But now of course we need to go ahead and apply the ABP villager, which has the correct animations and skeleton mesh for this character. And now boom, as you can see, we have exactly the same animation that we're feeding into this output pose. And if I press play, we have the walk animation. Now it looks very bad because, well, when we are not moving, this animation is still playing. So this is where we go ahead and need to link the blend space. Delete this node and drag the blend space into here. And now if we plug this here, boom, we are using the blend space, right? So this is our value of speed. Right now it's set to 0, therefore the character is not moving. But if I was to set this to 500 and compile, boom, this goes ahead and moves. So this is working just fine. I mean, if I set this to 0 and press play, we are playing the animation. But we still need to connect the speed parameter over here with our actual velocity in game. So how can we do this? Well, through variables. So let's right click on this value and promote this into a new variable. And let's go ahead and name this speed, lowercase, and connect this. And there we go. So now this value will be fed from this variable, okay? And if you don't know, a variable is simply a named data item, okay? So for example, this variable could contain whatever type of number, okay? And this will be fed into the speed, okay? So a float is a variable type, and a float is simply numbers with decimals, okay? So we can be super accurate with our speed. We will check out variables a bit later on when we go into the blueprints and so on, right? But in this case, let's go to the event graph. Now these are actually blueprints, okay? So blueprints are not, again, only in certain blueprint classes like our player character. They will always be available, in, for example, animation blueprints and so on. So they're used a lot through different types of assets. So in this case, what we need to do is, in real time while we play the game, get our current speed of the player and feed this into this variable so the blend space will update, and then the output pose will match the one that we want, if that makes sense. So the only thing we need to do right now is just update this variable with the current speed of the player. And we can do this, as I just mentioned, in the event graph, where we can actually run blueprints. So right now we have two different nodes. We have the event blueprint update animation and the try get pawn honor. So basically this node is the update, and this will run every single frame, okay? So every frame, so I mentioned that we're running at 60 frames per second, it will be executing the following code. Therefore, it will mean that this will be constantly looping and checking for some data. In this case, we can go ahead and use this to constantly, in a loop, update this variable with our player's movement. And then we have the try get pawn owner. This node essentially gets the owner of this animation blueprint. So for example, in our third person character blueprint, if we select our mesh, you can see that the anim class is villager. In this case, the owner of this anim class is this blueprint. So we will be getting the owner. And that's super cool. Why? Well, because this is a pawn. A pawn on Unreal essentially is something that can move. Therefore, we have the property of velocity. So this means that I can go into the ABP villager, drag and say get velocity, and get this velocity over here, as you can see. And literally with that, I can go ahead and plug this into my variable, but we have a single issue. This is a vector and our variable is a float. So there are different variable types. There's a quick note to fix this. We can just use the vector length, and it will convert this velocity into a float, which will be essentially the speed. So then I can just drag this and we have two options. We can get the variable or set the variable. In this case, we want to update the variable, so set will be the one that you want to select. And then we can plug the update to the set and then drag the return value of our velocity to our speed. And now when I compile, press play, as you can see, every frame this is being called, and therefore we're getting the owner's speed, so the third person catches, velocity, converting this into a nice float and putting this into the speed. Now, if you didn't understand really the workflow of this, don't worry, because we will kind of just go more in depth in blueprint nodes when we go into the AI and so on, which will be right after this, okay? But now what you just need to know is that, boom, we have this length, and we can go ahead and move around, and when we are not moving, the speed is 0. Therefore, in our blend space, we play the add animation. But when we move, we have a different type of speed. Therefore, we go ahead and move, which is really, really cool. So there we go. Now, this is cool, but right now at this moment, we are slightly limited. Because if we press play and jump, as you can see, we are not really playing a jump animation. It's just kind of bugging out. This is because our speed is increasing, but not in the correct way. Because of course we are flying, right? We're falling, and we don't want to kind of play the walking animation, even though our speed is higher, because we are just falling, right? We want to play the jumping animation. So how can we do this? Well, creating multiple states. So let's go back to our characters folder, villager, animations, and open up ABP villager, and right over here we can go to the anim graph. So in the anim graph is where we basically place all of the animation nodes, and in the event graph is where we go ahead and get all the logic to fill in into these animation graphs, as you might have discovered already, right? So what we need to do right now is go ahead and create different states. So we will have a state of on the ground, which will be like walking and idle, which is this blend space. And then we will have another state of jumping. And then we're gonna have another state of, falling, and then another state of landing, right? So this is exactly what we need to do. So how can we achieve this? Well, we can just right click on this graph and type state machine. And we can create a new state machine. So let's go ahead and click this and rename this to be something as locomotion, because this will be essentially the locomotion of our character, right? The movement. So let's go ahead and connect this to result and just move this apart and compile. Now you will notice that we have a warning and our character lost the cool animation that he was having. This because we are now fitting the output post with this state machine, which is essentially empty. So let's double click to open up this state machine, and let's go ahead and start to add some states. So from the entry point, we can create a new state, and we name this to something as idle and walking. And now we have a new state, which will be by default as is connected to the entry point, and it will simply contain the idle and walking animations. Now right now, of course, still there's nothing inside of this walking node. So if I double click, I can open up this new state, and we can put something once again into an output node. In this case, we want to drag our animation blend space. So in the asset browser, we can drag this, connect this to the result, and boom, we're good to go. We just need to, plug in the speed variable as we did before, and that's it. Compile, save, and we're back to normal. This is because in our locomotion state machine, we have an initial state, which is the item walking, and this contains our blend space. So now in here we can delete these two nodes and we have a fully working state machine, but of course this will still not fix our problem of jumping because we haven't set up the other states for jumping. So if we double click to open up once again the locomotion state machine, we can start to create new states. So let's right click and add a new state, and let's call this jump. So right in this new state, let's double click and drag the jump animation and connect this. Compile save and go back to the locomotion state machine. So now we have a new state with our jumping animation. So how do we go from here to here? Well, we can simply connect the states. So if we go ahead and hover over the border of this state, we can drag and create a transition. So now we can connect this to this other state, and boom, we have a nice transition. Now we need a rule for this transition to happen. As you can see, it's identified by this little icon. So if I double click on this, we can enter into a Boolean result. Booleans in Unreal are basically true or false. Well, in Unreal or any programming language really, right? So if something is true, we will transition from item walking to the jump state. So how do we go ahead and set up this transition, and what do we specifically put on this? Well, it will simply be if the character is not on the ground, aka is falling. And our character movement component does have that value. So if I go to the event graph, as you can see, we are getting the owner, right? So it's our character, getting the velocity, length, and putting this to the speed. So we need to do exactly the same thing, but for our characters if it's on ground or falling. And we do have a variable for this. Now you will see that if we drag from here and say, okay, get, falling or whatever, we will not get anything. This is because we need to get the specific class, because right now this is simply a generic pawn. Okay, now a pawn is basically a character in Unreal that can move, but it doesn't know what type of pawns, because this could be another blueprint. This could be like a empty blueprint of character that doesn't contain any logic. So how do we know that is the villager blueprint, and how do we access all of the logic? Well, we can do one thing, which is to cast. Okay, so right over here, let's add a begin play blueprint event. So when the game starts, we will go ahead and do something. In this case, we want to copy and paste this node, and from here do a cast to third person character blueprint, and boom. So what does this cast node does? Well, we simply access the specific class. Right now the owner could be anything, because right now this mesh has the anim class, but the anim blueprint doesn't know what specific class it is. It just knows that it's on something. So in order to find out if we are in a third person character, we need to use this cast node. If we cast, we can now get all the properties. Therefore, we can save this cast into a variable, and this will be simply the character BP. So now we have the whole character blueprint in a nice variable that we can call at any time. And this character blueprint contains all of this information. So back over here, I can drag character BP and get the movement component. If I scroll down, we can find it over here. This movement component is essentially this component, and it contains all these options, right? So over here I can say falling, and there we go, we have a movement variable which is falling. So make sure to not select the one of nav mesh, but to select the one of movement, and boom, we have a nice boolean. Therefore we can right click, promote this to a variable, and this will be is falling question mark because it's a boolean. Drag this here, and there we go. Nice and simple. So now in the update, we are also checking if the player is falling or not. So we can play the jumping animation, the falling loop, and the landing, and all of this kind of stuff, right? Now, this is only accessible through the character's variable, not through the try get pawn owner, because, well, our character's variable is a direct reference to our third person character class with all the components, okay? So, cool. With that done, it is time to go ahead and make sure that we can transition. So back in our transition, we can simply get is falling and plug it in. So now, if we are falling, it will play the jumping animation. So if I go ahead and jump, boom, we play the jumping animation. But of course, when it ends, or we reach the ground, it doesn't go back to our transition. This is because we don't have a back transition. But of course, we don't want a back transition just like that. We want to be able to play a landing animation and more stuff, right? So we have the jump state, but now just when we finish up jumping, we want to transition into another state. So let's add a new state, and this new state will be the falling loop. All right, boom, there we go. Why are we adding a falling loop? Well, I mean, in here the ground is pretty close, but imagine that I climbed it up here and I jumped. As soon as the animation of jumping finishes on mid-air, so imagine that the animation ends over here, I will go back to the idling on mid-air, right? I only want to do so when I'm on the ground. That's why we want to enter in this new state, drag fall loop, connect this over here, and make sure to select the fall loop, and on the details panel enable loop animation. That way this animation will loop, and it's important, right? Because we don't know how much time we're going to be falling. And then we want to add one last state, which is going to be the land. And now if we double click on this state, we can drag the land animation and connect this over here. And of course, we don't want any looping or anything like that, okay? Because this is just a one-time animation. So once we jump, we immediately want to go to the falling loop without any condition. We can go ahead and just go ahead and enable the automatic rule based on sequence, so that once we finish playing the jump animation, we directly go to the falling loop, okay? Now to go from falling to landing, we need to do one thing, and it's to check if we are not longer flying. So we drag this, we can get a not boolean, and this will mean that this is not true. So if we are not falling anymore, we'll go back to normal. And this will work. If I jump, I go back to normal, as you can see. But there's still one last connection to do, which is to connect from landing back to the idle and walking, okay? So I can put this over here, select this sequence, and enable the automatic rule based on sequence once again, because as soon as the landing animation finishes, we want to go back to idle and walking, and we don't want any condition, okay? And now this will work. If I jump and land, everything works as it is. But we're having one error when we, exit the play mode, and it's basically that it's trying to access the character BP variable, but it's not assigned. This is because the begin play is starting after the update animation. So the only thing that we need to do is right click on this character variable and convert this to a validated get. Therefore, it will only go ahead and continue executing the code if this character variable is filled in, because otherwise this will be null, which means that it will contain essentially nothing. Therefore, this will be empty, and it will simply just cause errors. Now, when we actually go ahead and just press play and next hit, we don't have any errors because we only continue if this character variable is set. And with that done, we want to do one little thing, because right now when we go ahead and walk and jump and land, as you can see, the landing animation doesn't look very good because it's standing still, but we're still moving. So we want to make sure that this will be an additive animation. An additive animation is essentially an animation that plays on top of another one, and it merges them to go ahead and create a nice kind of, just transition. So if we go to the characters folder, go to villager and animations, we can go ahead and open up the land animation. And we scroll down, we can see that we have the anim type of additive. In this case, we want this to be on local additive, and this one should be a frame. And I'm not gonna go from this animation, okay? Now I'm not gonna go into a lot of kind of detail into this, so I'm gonna just plug in frame 15, for example, right? Or even 20. But basically, this is a simple setting to make sure that we have an additive animation going on. Like I said, I'm not gonna really explain in detail because you don't really need to know this for this tutorial, okay? So with that done, we need to do one little configuration, because otherwise, boom, a character disappears. Why? Because there's not any additive animation to add on top of the landing, and it simply just bugs out. So back in our locomotion states, we can go to the landing and use this node, which is the additive. And it has to be apply additive. Now our base will be not our landing. This will be the additive, right? But our base will indeed want to be our blend space. Okay, so let's connect this over here, drag the speed, and that's it. This will mean that our base for the additive animation will be our current locomotion, but our additive will be the landing. Therefore, now when I walk and land, as you can see, boom, he lands and he continues to walk, and everything is perfect. So there we go, we have all of the animations for our character set up, which is looking really cool. Okay, so now we have all of the animations for our character, and it looks insane, right? And we actually only built this in a couple of minutes, and it's actually, pretty straightforward if you learn the blend space and simply some states in the animation blueprint. But now it is time to go ahead and continue creating our game. And by the way, guys, if you are finding this tutorial helpful, I would really appreciate it. You could like the video and subscribe to my channel. I have over 700 Unreal Engine 5 tutorials. And on top of that, join my huge Discord server with over 10,000 game developers to be in the best conversations. With that said, let's get back to the video. And the next thing is an enemy AI. Now, before diving into an enemy AI, which we're gonna be making, super simple, let's go ahead and cover a bit of the basics for blueprints. I know that I covered them a bit on the animation blueprint because we had the event graph, but I want to go a bit more in depth with them before we go and dive in with our AI. So for this, what I'm going to do is open up the third-person character blueprint, which is under here. And let's implement some logic, okay? So basically, nodes in Unreal will always go from left to right, to whatever they're connected to whatever they're connected, okay? So how do they work? Well, basically, as you can see, we have a main kind of plug, which is the white one. This is the executable connection, okay? So as soon as this node executes, this will go to the next node through this white cable, okay? And you will see, oh, there's other cables that are connected too. What is going on? Well, basically, each node might have an input and an output, okay? The inputs will always be on the left side and the outputs on the right side, okay? So basically, this player controller needs an input, and this other node is given that input, okay? As simple as that. But if I was to disconnect this main connection, which is the executable connection, right, which is the white one, this will simply not execute because we only have one pin, which is the input, but this will never execute because we need this white one, okay? So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in how we can make a simple flashlight. Now this flashlight does have, nothing to do with our game. This is purely to learn blueprints for a second, okay? Because I want to do that before we dive into AI, and actually a flashlight is quite interesting to make, okay? So let's go ahead and make sure that when we press a key, we turn on this flashlight, okay? So let's right click on the graph to add a new node, and let's search for, the E key, for example, right? Scroll down until we find the E key, which is here with a symbol, and drag this, okay? So once we press the E key, we can do something. So just as a test, I could drag and add this print string, and it will print hello on the screen. So I press play and press E, boom, we get a lot of hellos at the top left of the screen, right? So as you can see, this is executing because this white connection is connected, okay? But instead of printing hello, we want to enable a flashlight, okay? So first of all, a flashlight is essentially a light, right? So how can we go ahead and just add a light into our world? Well, as you can see, in the component section, we have a lot of stuff that we can add, meaning that we can add a point light. So if I go to the capsule component, I can drag a point light, and boom, this will be a flashlight. So I can place this over here, right, and rename this to be flashlight, right? And really, you can add whatever type of components you want, right? And now what we can do is make sure that this flashlight is disabled by default, because if we press play, as you can see, it's right enabled. So in the flashlight, I can just simply search for visibility and disable this. That way, when we press play, it's initially not enabled. But if I go back to the event graph and drag this flashlight, which I can just drag from the components, I can set the visibility to be enabled. So we enable this boolean, I can press play, and press E, and boom, we enable the flashlight. As you can see, this is very simple, right? When we press a key, right, we go and execute this node based on this white cable, and then we can go ahead and do something, right? So we access a component that we had, and then go ahead and enable this. Now this visibility can work for pretty much anything. Right now I have the input, as I mentioned before, right, because it's in the left side, as the flashlight, but it could be the mesh. If I drag this and do the inverse, so disable it, when I press E, boom, the mesh disables, right? Because we are essentially passing a target to disable, and it doesn't really matter what. And that's it. I just wanted to kind of cover that basics, and now we can dive into our AI. Alright, so now it is finally time to create our enemy AI. So in the content browser, let's right click and create a new folder, and let's go ahead and call this blueprints. So in this new folder, let's right click and create a new blueprint class. And now what we can do is pick a parent class for this blueprint. So think of this as just presets, for example, right? So if we want to kind of create an AI, in this case, we will go ahead and select the character preset because it's the closest that we will get, right? In this case, for example, we have the actor class, which is just an object that can be spawned or placed in the world. As I mentioned at the beginning of the tutorial, we have a pawn, which is an actor that can be, you know, handling input from the player. The character is simply just a pawn that can have the ability to move around, and so on. So of course, as I just mentioned, for this AI, let's select the character class. And now let's call this BP underscore enemy AI and open this up. So as you can see, this is very similar to what we had with the third person character blueprint, but it's a brand new class, it's empty, so we need to fill in some stuff. So let's go ahead and select the mesh, and in the details panel, we can go ahead and assign a new skeletal mesh asset, and of course, this will be our villager. Now, as you can see, when we add it, it's in the incorrect position. So what we can do is just go ahead and manually adjust it. Now, there's a quicker way to do it like this, which is just to go to the details, and in location in the Z axis just put -89, and then the rotation in the Z axis put -90. And that's a quick way to go ahead and snap it into place, as you can see. So if I compile, save, go back to my level and drag it, as you can see, I can go ahead and rotate it so it's facing me, and when I press play, we have the enemy AI over there. But of course, it's not even animating. So let's go ahead and make sure that we have the correct animation blueprint assigned to this enemy AI. So let's go back to the blueprint, go to the mesh, details panel, and name class, and as we did with the other player, we need to add the villager. And now, yes, we have the enemy AI animating, which is really cool. So now it's time to make him go ahead and chase me around, right? So let's go back to the enemy AI and open up the event graph. And let's start to go ahead and implement the logic for this AI. Now, for this tutorial, we are gonna go ahead and make the AI very, very simple. So the AI will be able to detect the player and then simply chase him, and when he reaches the player, he will simply attack. So let's go ahead and delete this two nodes, which is the begin play and the tick, and let's simply leave the begin play. And right over here, what we can do is right click and create a custom event. So a custom event is our own event that we can call at any time. So let's go ahead and select this and simply rename this to something as chase player. And now, whenever we call this event, we can execute whatever code is over here. And of course, in this case, we want to make our AI move to the player. So we can call this node, which is AI move to. And this is a super nice node, which is default of Unreal. We will simply just move the AI to destination. So as you can see, it contains some inputs that it needs in order to work, right? Because they're in the left side of the node. As you can see, we have the pawn. What pawn it needs to move? Well, we want to move the AI. So I can drag it and say self and simply get a reference to self. And that way, this node will know that we want to move this blueprint, okay? Which is the enemy AI. Now for the destination, I do not want to set a manual location in my level. I want to go ahead and assign instead a target actor that it can follow. And of course, in this case, the target will be the player character. So I can simply say get player character and use this node, and now the AI will go to the player character's position. Then we have the acceptance radius. This is how close the AI will get to me. Let's increase this to 120 so he doesn't get like too close, you know? And that's it. Of course, right now, nothing will happen because we're not calling this chase player event. But just an example, if I was to set this chase player event on the begin play, when I press play, the AI will go ahead and chase me. But as you can see, he doesn't. Why? Well, this is simply because there's one thing that we need to add into our level. So this is not a bug that we had in our code. This is simply a configuration that Unreal needs in our level to be able to make AIs move around. So if we go up into the quickly add to the price section, we can go ahead and just add a bunch of stuff into our level, as you can see. But in this case, we are interested in the volume section and specifically the nav mesh bounce volume. If we drag this to a level, as you can see, it's a simple box. But if we select this, go to the details panel, and then in the scale, make sure this is locked, we can put this around 20, and now as you can see, this box will fill in the whole level. And now with the viewport selected, we can press P, and boom, we can see this green area. This green area is all of the calculated paths that the AI can go through. Okay, so this is an essential step when making AI. Otherwise, the AIs will simply not move. So now if I press play, boom, he starts to chase me. As you can see, he reaches me and he stops. So everything is going ahead and working perfectly. But you might have noticed that he's going a bit too fast, right? It doesn't really match his walking speed. So back in the blueprint of our enemy AI, we can go ahead and select the character movement component, and in the details panel, edit its parameters. And as you can see, if we go to the max walk speed, he has a speed of 600. And as you might remember, this is incorrect. It has to be 500 to match our animations. If now we compile and press play, it will go ahead and match the speed of the player, and it looks way nicer. Now there's one last thing that we want to change to our character's movement, which is the rotation. As you can see, he kind of just snaps, right? So we want to make sure that his rotation will be smooth, so it looks realistic and it looks kind of nice. So back over here, what we can do is select the character movement component, scroll down until we see the rotation settings, and simply enable orient rotation to movement. And then last but not least, let's go to the class defaults and search for yaw and disable this. We essentially just swapped the rotation setting of this AI. So instead of rotating using the default pawn movement, we will use the character movement, which is way smoother, okay? And now, yes, as you can see, he rotates way smoother. It's not super obvious stuff, but it does look a bit cleaner, okay? Now, instead of making sure that he immediately, starts chasing me even when he's not seeing me, right? We need to make sure that he only chases me if he detects me. How can we do that? Well, there's a really nice component in Unreal Engine that can easily do that. If we go and add a new component and search for pawn sensing, we have this component. So we just click on this, press enter, we add this new component, and as you can see, it added a ton of kind of crazy stuff. This is essentially gonna gizmos, which are representing the AI's vision, the AI's hearing, and all this stuff. So if we select this, we can go to the details panel and change the parameters. And let's go ahead and make sure that the AI cannot hear us. So let's disable hearing by just putting 0, and then also hear noise is disabled, okay? Because we're gonna have a simple AI and we're not gonna have hearing or anything like that. Then for the sight radius, let's put in like 2500. Okay, so he cannot see me from very, very far away. And then the peripheral vision angle, let's put in like 85, so his angle is a bit more short. And now when we press play, we still get the AI instantly going for us because we forgot one step, which is of course to link this event, which is on C pawn, with our chase player. So on the begin play, make sure to delete this chase player. As you can see, now he doesn't chase me, but also when he goes ahead and sees me, nothing happens because we need to kind of link this on C pawn event with our chase player. How can we do that? Well, by simply adding this new event and then calling chase player. And there you go. Now it will work because this event is called when this pawn sensing component sees a player. And simply it will call this node chase player and everything will work. So now when I press play, it doesn't do anything, but I go in front of him and now he's constantly going ahead and chasing me, as you can see, which is pretty cool. And when he reaches my destination, he stops. But now of course, we don't want him to stop. We want him to go ahead and play an attack. So let's go ahead and do this. Alright, so let's go ahead and import the attack animation. So for this, let's go up into Window, Fab, and let's go ahead and find this character interaction add-on volume 1. So I will link this in the resources zip, and basically what you can do is simply go ahead and add this into the project. Let's go ahead and click this, and after a few seconds we should have it in our project. So this includes some really cool animations, and we have one which is going to be super good for our attack. There we go, and already imported the animation. So now as you can see, we have this new folder called interaction. Now the only animation that we want is going to be here under animations, close combat, attack, crowbar, this one, okay? So literally what we're going to do is make sure to delete everything except this animation. But before we do that, what we actually want to do is go ahead and make sure that this animation works for our character. Right now this is using the UE4 skeleton, and we want to use the villager skeleton. So for this, we can simply retard it. Now, it's super easy to retard it in Unreal Engine 5.5. The only thing we need to do is right click on this animation, click on retard animations, and the source will be UE4, but the target will be, of course, our villager. Now simply search for crowbar, and of course select the A crowbar attack. And with that said, we can click on export animation, and now under content we can click on export, close this window, and then we have it over here working perfectly fine. The only thing we want to do now is to go ahead and delete the whole interaction folder. So just press delete, yes, and then after a few seconds, and just loading times, finding assets, we can go ahead and press delete, and after for a few more seconds we should have, there we go, this animation ready, but the interaction folder out. So as you can see, it literally just deleted everything except the animation that we need. So thanks for the asset creator for creating this really cool animation that we're going to be using. So let's make sure to move this into the characters folder. So let's go ahead and just drag this into characters, move here, drag this into villager, move here, and then drag this into animations, move here, right click, new folder, let's call this something as attack, and then finally drag this, move here, and simply let's call this A underscore attack. It's nice and neat, and that's it, everything is configured. So how can we go ahead and make sure that this AI will play this attack animation when he sees us and reaches our destination? Do we need to go ahead and open up the villagers animation blueprint and go and create a new state and all that stuff? No. Actually, there is a super cool way to play one-time animations inside of Unreal from blueprints without needing to create crazy states, and it's perfect for attacks, for damage things, and just combat and so on, right? So over here, let's go back to our content browser and go into attack animation, and right over here, let's right click, hit on create montage. Let's go ahead and rename this to attack montage. That's actually perfect. And now we have this other type of animation asset. So what is this? Well, this is a montage, and Unreal can play montages from blueprints at any time. So now that this is a montage, it's super easy because we can simply just go ahead and open up our enemy AI. So select it in our world, press Ctrl E to edit it, and now when we reach the destination, which is on success, right, on the AI move to the chase player, we can call this node, which is the play montage. Let's select this top one, and now we just need some parameters. So first of all, what skeleton mesh we want to play on? Well, we want to play on our mesh, connect that there. What montage we want to play? Well, it's a drop down, so we can select this attack montage that we just created, and then everything can leave, just by default. And actually now, you will see that when we press play, nothing will happen. Why? Well, because anim montages require one little thing in our animation blueprint to know to work. So if we go to animations and open up APP Villager, if you go to the name graph, we just need to add this little thing, which is default slot. So what is this? What does this have to do with montages? Well, montages are always played on a montage slot. okay? In this case, this attack is played on the default slot, as you can see. It says default, right? Therefore, we need a default slot in our animation blueprint to enable this slot to happen, okay? So just remember that anytime you want to play an animation montage, you need to add a slot. Now, we need to add this slot always right before the output post, because, I mean, we cannot connect this right before, right? Because there's not any inputs, right, to here. But imagine we had an input over here. Well, you know, the locomotion will always override the slot, so we will never see our animation montages. But if we have this after, our animation montages will happen after, therefore they have a priority, so they will happen, you know? So now, yes, when we press play, he will go ahead and play the attack animation, and boom! He is attacking me. Now, it's pretty bugged. This is because the camera is colliding with him every time he attacks. So there's a quick fix for this. We can go to the enemy AI, viewport, select the mesh, and in details panel, we can scroll down. And in the collision presets, we can expand this and set this to custom. And as you can see, we have a whole bunch of checkboxes in terms of ignore, overlap, or block. In this case, we simply want to get the camera trace and set this to ignore. That way, the camera will not collide with this. But there's another collision in this actor, which is the capsule component. So we need to do exactly the same thing. Select the capsule component. In the preset, set this to custom, camera, ignore. Compile, save, and now this will be fixed. And boom. But as you can see, he bugged kind of at the beginning, right? When he reached my destination. It kind of bugged. This is simply because he's trying to play the animation multiple times without leaving time and space in between them, which is just ending up in a kind of ugly looking kind of thing. So what we can do is simply create a new variable and be can attack question mark, and this will be a boolean, okay? So this will be simply true or false, count the enemy AI attack or not. Now let's select this can attack, compile, and set this by true by default. This is very important, otherwise the enemy AI will never be able to attack. So right when we reach the destination, we're gonna get the attack and add a branch, okay? And a branch will simply be an if statement. So if this is true, we will go ahead and attack, right? Because we can attack. If this is false, well, we will not do anything because we can't attack. As simple as that, okay? So let me leave some spacing. And then simply once, okay, actually let's do it here. Once we start attacking, we need to make sure to get this and set, okay, this can attack to false. That way now the enemy AI will know that it's attacking, so we cannot attack anymore. So therefore, we cannot attack and pass this part over here. And then on completed, so when the animation finishes, we can simply set this to be true. Well, uncompleted or interrupted. You know, imagine that the animation is interrupted. We want to go ahead and fix this, right? So with that said, if we go ahead and press play, he will go ahead and chase me, and boom, he attacks me correctly, right? He waits until the animation is finished, but it doesn't look very good. First of all, we need to enable root motion in our animation. So let's open up a attack, scroll down, and enable root motion. And now you will see that the animation will look 10 times better. There we go. Because the character will move in a 3D space to match the animation. Now, this is not available in all animations. This is only because the animation is well done, okay? But with that said, without getting too in depth of what, you know, about what is root motion, let's simply just continue with our attacks. Right now, it's a bit too, you know, long, right? We want to short the attack. It kind of waits too long. It doesn't look too good, right? So what we can do is simply make sure that the montage will set the can attack to true a bit sooner. We can do this by an anim notify. So we open this up. We can simply find where we want to kind of go back to our animation to run here. And then in the notify section, we can right click, add notify, montage notify. Save, close, and right over here, instead of uncompleted, we can hold Control and move this to unnotify begin and make sure to leave the interrupted. Now, as you can see, you will go ahead and make the animations a bit quicker, which is pretty cool. Okay, this is a small tweak, you know. And now we have this enemy AI which comes to me, attacks, and then continues, which is pretty cool, as you can see. But of course, he doesn't deal any damage, so we need to make sure that he will go ahead and add like a knockback. So in order to add a knockback to my player, let's go into the enemy AI, and right over here we need to go ahead and make a specific thing, which is gonna be a sphere trace by channel. What is this? Well, let's simply just add it and I'll explain as we go. So a sphere trace by channel is simply a sphere that will go from one point to another, okay? And it will simply detect things in the way. So we can use this to detect our player, okay? So if our player goes ahead and, you know, is detected by this thing, we can apply damage. So over here, what we can do is simply add a start and an end point, okay? In this case, the start point will simply be the get actor location of this enemy AI, so whatever place is right now in the world. And the end point will be the get actor rotation. I want to get the direction that is looking, so let's get the forward vector, okay? That's how we can get the direction that he's looking at. And then from here, we can simply times this by a value. But we want to right click on the second pin and convert this into a float. That way it's a simple number, and this will essentially be the distance on how far away the AI can reach me in terms of the trace. Let's put in right now like 300, and I simply now get the location and add this with a multiplication, and this will give us our endpoint. Now for the radius, because this is a sphere, let's put in like 25, and then that's pretty much it. Just to test, let's go ahead and click the debug type and put this for duration and like for, you know, 0.5 seconds. If I now press play, you can see that when he attacks, he creates this kind of beam, as you can see, right? So this beam will essentially go ahead and collide with me, as you can see. And if it collides with me, it will apply some damage. So that's a bit too long. Let's make it maybe like 150. And it's just kind of playing around with what looks best. Yeah, that's literally perfect. Maybe a bit more, maybe like 180. And also, as you can see, it's red and it's never turning green like it should, because it's not detecting me. That's because of the trace channel, right? Right now it says this one, but to be sure that it will detect only the player and not other things in the world, we will create our own trace channel that only the player can be detected as. So if we go to edit, press settings, we can scroll down to collision, and under trace channels, create a new trace channel and name this player. Now the default has to be ignored, so all of the assets in Unreal by default will have this trace to ignore, but then the player is going to be the only one that has this trace to block. Accept, close, go back to enemy AI, compile so it refreshes, and then the trace channel is going to be player. Now this tool will not work because the player needs to have that trace channel enabled. So under third person, blueprints, third person catch blueprint, I'm going to go to the viewport, select the mesh, scroll down, and now we have here, as you can see, the collision presets. Set this to custom, and then player will be block. And now, yes, as you can see, when the AI attacks and launches the trace, it turns green because it's detecting the player. And it would not detect any other thing than the player if it accidentally, hits the wall. So it will not like launch the wall or anything like that. There we go. So now we just need to add the impulse. So let's go back to the enemy AI. And as you can see, the sphere trace by channel will give two outputs, right? Because they're at the right side of the node. We'll get a return value, which is a boolean, so have we hit something or not, and then an out hit, which is a lot of properties. So first of all, let's check if we have actually hit something, and we will only continue if we have actually hit something with a branch. Otherwise, we might have like bugs, and errors. Then let's get the out hit, and let's break this, because this is a structure, and this will contain, as you can see, a lot of information about what we have collided with. Well, in this case, the AI has collided with, right? In this case, we simply want to get the actor cast to the class character, and then simply use the node, which is launch character. As simple as that. So we are simply getting the actor that the AI hit, casting to the character, so I can access this node of the character class, and then simply apply some velocity. In what direction? Well, I simply want to copy the direction of the sphere trace, because it's essentially just gonna be the same, right? We want to go ahead and make sure that the AI will go and launch the character to the direction that he's facing, right? So we can simply copy and paste the 3 nodes and then simply add one little thing over here and put in the Z to be around 25 and reconnect this. So he will also go a bit higher. And now when I press play and he attacks me, you will see that we cannot push the player, but it doesn't look very good because there's not enough power. Let's go ahead and put this to around 1000, and now you will see that slowly you will start to get a better representation. As you can see, this maybe is too much, maybe like 500, and then maybe a bit more like 120 on the Z, which Z, as you can see, is upwards. Okay, as you can see now we get a better way, but it's still not too good. So let's put in the Z maybe like 2000. Honestly, you might want to add like more of a push over here. Let's see. Wow, that's too much, as you can see. So yeah, I mean, it's really up to you what you put in here, but it's really just playing with the values, right? So I'm just playing with the values real time. As you can see, we're getting a pretty good, you know, kind of number. Let's put in like, you know, 850 over here and keep playing with the values until we get what we want. And that looks pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. So we, you know, get pushed away. So you can go ahead and play around with the, you know, knockbacks, but the cool thing is that we can make this a variable, so it's easy to edit. So you just right click, multi-variable, and this will be the frontal knockback. Compile, make sure that it's set to 850, and then right click and split the struct, so we have everything as individual pins, and then right click, promote variable, and this will be the upwards, you know, knockback. There we go. And I did not write that property. There we go. Cool. And make sure this set also to 500. Okay, so now it's easy to edit also from any other part of the code, which is pretty nice. And that's it. That's really how we have our enemy AI. Let's set the debug type to none. That way we don't see those ugly lines, and we can simply go ahead and, you know, push the player, and it's looking really cool. Now the enemy AI is kind of stupid right now because he's, you know, attacking with an invisible weapon. And also you might notice one little thing, which is that we're actually pushing the player before he swings his axe. So we're gonna make a little notification over here. I'm gonna go ahead and open up the villager animations attack montage. I'm gonna change the notify to be exactly where we want to hit. Okay, so around here. Save, go back to our AI, so select this, Ctrl E, and then in the montage section, change uncompleted to be on here, and on notify begin, let's change this to be here. So we essentially just swapped the logic to happen on the notify begin, where he launches the trace. Okay, so basically at this point in the animation, he will launch the trace. Okay, which is where the notify begins, right in this point. But then when the animation is completed, we'll go back to the attacking normal. And I know that we had it before so that the notify was the ending point, but we want to have it, you know, used for the attack trace. It's gonna be better. And now it's gonna be way smoother. As you can see now, it actually like matches and it looks 10 times better. And now, yes, we can go ahead and import the AI's weapon, right? Because right now he doesn't have anything. So what we can do is use Fab. We go up to Window, we can scroll down to Fab and open this up. And now we can just find a cool weapon, okay? So we search here, we can find like just weapon maybe, just type in. And now we can go into the price and put this on free. And now you can see that I have a whole just a bunch of weapons, you know. We have, for example, this axe that could be used, which is like stylized, you know, which is important. I don't know, we have a lot of options over here. In this case, I want to choose this axe. Yeah, I kind of like it, okay? So let's go ahead and just make sure to put this to our side and simply drag this axe into the level. And now after a few seconds, boom, it imported the axe, which is pretty cool. We can close fab, and there we go. So let's delete this axe from the level, and now we have it, as you can see, imported in this fab folder, right, which is pretty cool. So first of all, let's rename this to axe. Alright, so how do we add this axe into the enemy AI's character? Well, what we need to do is create a new socket in its skeleton. So go to content, characters, villager, and open up the skeleton. As you can see, we have a hierarchy of a lot of bones. In this case, let's find the, let's see what arm. Yeah, so we want to attach really to the right hand, okay? So hand R, right click, add socket. We name this socket to, kind of weapon. Right click on this new socket and add a preview asset, okay? And this will be our axe. So this socket is essentially like an invisible position where we can go ahead and place, attach weapons and so on. And as you can see, what we can do is simply just add this preview asset to help us, position this new socket. So let's go ahead and just put the preview animation to be the attack, so it's easier, and find a spot over here for our attack. So let's do like here. Now it's just time to go ahead and start to rotate this around. So make sure they have this set on this cube, so it's local. And now we simply just need to go ahead and start kind of rotating this, and of course making this bigger because it's a bit too small. So really this is nothing, just kind of that can be perfect. I mean, if you spend hours placing this, I guess you could get a perfect positioning, but overall it's really just making sure that it looks nice. And I mean, the thing is that this is kind of stylized and it happens pretty quick, so it doesn't really matter if it's not as exact. But as you can see, this is literally perfect. And if you want to copy my exact positioning, you can just copy these values and paste them on into the weapon. Now you press play, you can see that the enemy AI doesn't have the axe. This is because, as I just mentioned, the axe is only a preview, so we can help us place the socket. So now it's time to open up the enemy AI. So let's select this, Ctrl E, go to the viewport, and now selecting the mesh, we can add a new static mesh, and this will be the weapon. Now make sure that this weapon is a child of mesh. Why? Well, this will enable us to attach that into the socket. So first of all, the static mesh will be the axe, and then the parent socket will be the weapon. And there we go. And it only appeared, right, because it's a child of mesh. And that's it. Now let's make sure that the weapon has the collision preset on no collision, because we detect the player with a trace, not with the sword or with the axe or whatever it is. And now yes, he goes, he attacks, and it looks perfect. And as you can see, it looks like he's actually, applying damage to me through the axe, but it's actually doing it through this invisible trace, which is really nice. Now right now the enemy can go ahead and kind of slam us, but we cannot go ahead and simply kind of dash or whatever, right, to escape from the enemy. So let's go ahead and implement a mechanic to dash the enemy and run away from him. So let's go ahead and create a new input. How do we create a new input? Well, there's multiple ways. Well, it's really two systems in Unreal to creating input. In this case, let's use the new enhanced input system. Now I call it new, but it has been already out for a year, so I don't know why I call it new, but I mean it's relatively new to the Unreal Engine, engine as a whole. So instead of the third person folder, we can open up the input, actions, and find all of our inputs. So we right click, go to input section, and create a new input action. We can name this IA underscore and something as dash. Now we don't need to go ahead and change anything about this input. We can just save and close, okay? Now if we go back to the input, you can see that we have this IMC. If we open this up, this is essentially a collection of all the inputs that the player can use. So this means that we could have a lot of inputs created over here, but the player couldn't use them because they're not in this collection. So let's add this new dash input, and if we expand this, we can apply a key. So we can search here, for example, I don't know, the what key you want to have, for example, the left mouse button, right? But an easier way is to click on this and then click the mouse or the key that you want to apply. So for example, the left mouse button, and that's just an easy way, right? So there we go. So the input is configured, but we need to implement the logic. So we open up the third person catch blueprint, and we go to the event graph. Right over here, we can just right click and do IA underscore dash, and select the first one, which is the one with the arrow, enhance action events. And now if we expand this, we can add the logic when we start pressing the key. So what do we want? Well, we want to use the same functionality as we did with the enemy AI, which is the dash, right? So if we go to the enemy, we can essentially just copy this node, okay, which is the whole formula and the character launch character node itself. Just paste it in, connect it on started, not triggered, because now it will happen, you know, every time that you hold. And then we just want to kind of just delete these variables and, I don't know, put the values, which are 850 and 500. So on here it will be float 850 and then 200, or sorry, 500 was, and that's it. Okay, so let's realign with Q. Okay, and there we go, boom, and that's it. So now when I go ahead and press the left mouse button, I go ahead and kind of do this, and I can actually fly if I spam it. So we need to do one thing, which is to only do this every so often. How can we do this? Well, we could do the boolean that we added for the enemy AI and time it, but an easier way is to add a do once node, and this node will only allow a certain, you know, flow of code to happen if this gate is opened. And what we can do is simply add a delay over here and say, okay, after 0.2 seconds we're gonna reset this node, therefore the AI can, sorry, the AI, not the player, can go ahead and dash again. And now, you can see I cannot spam. I spam it, but less often, you know, so maybe we simply need to increase this to like 0.8 seconds, something like that. Yeah, that's better. As you can see, I can dash only every so often, which is way better. Now, still, this doesn't look very good. First of all, because we need to apply a more of a power, so let's do this. But then also, just the animation doesn't look very good. So let's see what we can do to improve it. Alright, so we can do this by importing an animation. So let's go up into Window and click on Fab. And simply go ahead and search for Infinity Rogue. And then you will find this Infinity Rogue anims. You don't find it, just make sure that you filter by free. Click on Add to Project and then select the closest version, which will be 5.3. Add to project, and then after a few seconds we should have it installed. There we go, and we have this demo and animations folder. So in this case we want the root motion one, and we have some cool ones. We have, for example, this flip, and we have this flip, and okay, so this is the one that we want. Okay, so this RM forward flip anim. And we want to use root motion because this will move the character in the 3D space, okay? Rather than using our launch character mode, okay? So we can right click on this, click on retarget animations, set this to be the villager, and then find the flip, and it's gonna be RM underscore FW underscore flip anim. There you go. So you can see it looks so cool. Click on export animation and then simply go to characters, villagers, animations, and then just there, or actually in attack, and export. Export, and boom. Close this window, and that's it. It's looking pretty cool, as you can see. So let's make sure to right click and create an animation montage so we can play from, you know, any blueprint. And now we go back to the third person character blueprint. We can go ahead and make sure to disable the launch character and simply do a play montage, okay, which is going to be this first one, and then simply the mesh will be this one, the montage to play will be the flip, and then we can just plug this into here, okay. And instead of doing a whole delay in that stuff, we can go ahead and just first of all break this and get out this nodes and put them here. There you go, and then simply on the completed reset this, okay. So basically once the animation finishes executing, we can do it again. So now when I press play and I press the left mouse button, boom, the character ragdolls, but he doesn't go forward. Root motion is not working. What is going on? Well, that's simply because we need to enable the checkbox manually. So let's go to the characters folder, villager animations, attack, and then in the original animation sequence, so not in the montage, but the original one, in the asset details, if we scroll down, we can enable root motion, and now, yes, boom, we go ahead and backflip, which is pretty cool. Now, this isn't so of a big of a flip, right? So what can we do to make him go a bit more far away? Well, let's open up the animation, and right over here, let's scroll down and disable enable root motion, but enable force root lock. That way now, the animation will stay in position. And if we go back to the third person character, what we can do is delete this nose here and put this back on position. So that's why I didn't delete it completely, because we still need to do the movement through the launch character, right? Because the root motion is instead to be as exactly as we want, right? So now, as you can see, boom, we have this working like that. Now the thing is that it's doing a bit too much in my opinion, so maybe like 850 is a bit better, and maybe it's a bit too high, but you can play with that. Now yes, the character lands again when we do this. So in here we are going to simply go ahead and create a new boolean, which is be like dodging question mark, and then simply over here let's set this to true, and then on complete we can set this to false. So we can simply use move this to be on here, and then it goes here. Okay, there we go. So we set it to false, and then in the animation blueprint, which is on characters, villager animations over here, and we can simply go to the locomotion and go to the jump section or land or any of this, right? All of these transitions, and just check if we are not falling. So really see the jump, and on here it's gonna be, are we falling? And we are not dodging. So we simply need to also go ahead and get the character movement once again and say get dodging, and simply promote this to a variable which is dodging with a lowercase d, plug this here. Now back in the state we can get dodging and add a not boolean. Okay, now we need to go ahead and do the exact same thing, so copy these three nodes on this other state, okay, which is landing. So we are not on the air anymore, and we are not dodging, and now as you can see it works, but the character does not go forward because I forgot to plug this here. And now yes, as you can see, we fixed that issue that we're having with the transitions, and everything is perfect, and it's pretty cool. Maybe I actually want to put this at a bit of more of a force. Yeah, this looks pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Now maybe we want to actually wait a bit on our flip to start making the flip, so maybe right when we jump. So let's add over here a montage notify, and then back over here we can switch this to be on the notify begin. That way he will start to flip actually when he needs to flip, and it's just working just fine, which is super cool. So we can go here and be like, hey, and we dodge. Oh. That's super cool, right? And we also don't need any more of this folder, so let's go ahead and just delete this as we did with the other animation pack, simply so that we have our project cleaned and we don't have like things that we will not use, you know, just laying around. It's just way better if we go ahead and import it later on again than just having it around without doing anything. Alright, so now it is time to add some sounds to spice things up. So in the content browser, let's right click and create a new folder, and this will be called audio. Right over here, let's go ahead and import some of the sounds that I will leave in the zip file. So simply drag them, and boom, we have them over here. So let's begin with the footsteps. Right now we have this simple footstep, but it's basically, you know, very repetitive. So what we can do is simply change slightly the pitch every time that we play it, so it sounds like we have multiple, you know, variations of the sound. So right click, go to audio, and create a meta sound source. Let's name this ms underscore footstep and open this up. And right over here, let's drag and say play wave player and say 1.0 mono. And then we can simplify the footstep, output, finished, and that's it. It plays every time. But of course, we want to go ahead and make sure that it will play, you know, slightly random each time. So we can get the random pitch and a random float and simply connect this here, and then put the minimum to be -3 and maximum 3. And now we save and press play. Each time is a bit different, if you notice. So let's go ahead and just add this into the walk animation. So let's go ahead and open up the characters, villager animations, and walk animation. And then over here, as you can see, we have a track for notifies. So yes, we can add notifies for, you know, sounds. So let's find the first footstep, which is around here. Right click, add notify, play sound. Select this. In the details, we can search for ms underscore footstep. Copy. Find the next one, which is around here. Click, Ctrl V, boom. And that's it. We have our walk animations, which is pretty cool. Now also, I want to go ahead and accelerate a bit the walk animation. I think that 1.5 will be a bit better. Oh, this is definitely better, as you can see. I don't know, it just matches a bit even better the velocity and also the, you know, walking speeds. Now let's make sure that the sound of footsteps is on 3D, because right now it's playing on 2D. So for example, for our enemy, we would hear it like in 2D and doesn't look very good. So in audio, we can right click and create a audio attenuation as a underscore character. And on here, we can essentially just define how far away we want to be able to hear sounds and what's the minimum, you know, range and so on. It basically just converts the sounds into 3D. So for the minimum, let's put 200, and for maximum, let's put 3000, okay? And with that done, we can save, close, and in our footstep, we can click on source, scroll down, and in attenuation, we can put as a character, okay? Now the sounds will be playing in 3D, which is really cool. Now let's do also the same thing for our, you know, axe hit, push, and so on. So let's duplicate the meta sound and change this to be the axe hit. And simply change the wave asset to be the axe hit. And it will change the pitch every time. Let's duplicate this, and this will be the axe whoosh. Open this up and simply put in here the axe whoosh, which is great. Volume on 2, yeah, a bit better. And also make sure that we have the sound attenuation for both of the axe hits, okay? So with that said, we just need to open up the enemy blueprint with Ctrl E, and then over here we can simply find where we start to play the attack, which is over here. So right after we say can attack, we can say, okay, play sound at location, so it's spawning in 3D, and we can say, okay, ms underscore axe whoosh, okay, when we start playing the animation. Now make sure that you select the ms one, which is the one with the pitch, you know, with a random pitch. Now for the location, this will be get actor location, and that's it. Now just copy this node and paste it right after we launch the character, and change this to be the ms axe hit. Okay, so we'll play the hit, and now you can see it's perfect. It's super cool, right? So really what we need to do now is add some cool particle effects to spice things up and just make things look a bit nicer. Alright, so now it is time to add a effect when the enemy hits us and also when we go ahead and dash. So let's go up into Window, Fab, and right over here let's click on the category settings and select VFX. And then let's go into the price section, open this up and change this to free. And now as you can see, we have a whole bunch of them, but today we're going to be selecting this one, which is the Realistic Starter VFX Pack Volume 2. Simply go ahead and select the free license, which is personal, and add this to the project. And after a few seconds, we should have the pack imported. There we go. So now over here in particles, we have a whole bunch of different categories. Now we have some hits over here, so we can go ahead and expand this, for example, leather, It's a pretty cool one. We have ice, we have asphalt, we have brick. We have a whole bunch of them. Now in this case, we need to find one that works for us. And remember that we are making a stylized game, okay? So in this case, I think that wood might work and leather, okay? So let's start with wood and leather. And of course we have also blood, right? Which is really, really cool. But in this game, it wouldn't fit, right, our game. So let's go ahead and just stick with our hits. So let's go and open up the enemy AI with Ctrl E. And let's go into the hit. So you remember that we had the chase player with a play montage, the sphere trace, and as soon as we hit the player, we launch the character and play a sound. Well, what we can add over here is that on top of this, we can spawn that effect. So if we go ahead and drag from here, we can say spawn system not. It's going to be emitter from location. Now there's also the spawn system location, as I just mentioned, but this one uses Niagara, which is the new system in Unreal. Now this particle pack uses Cascade, which is the old version in Unreal. Now this isn't a big of an issue. We can simply use this node, so we can use them. And for the first game that you guys are going to be making, this will be more than enough, okay? So with that said, let's go ahead and select the hit. And in this case, let's begin with the leather. Let's go ahead and plug in the location. And in this case, as you can see from the break hit result, we have a whole bunch of values, including an impact point. Let's go ahead and drag this to our location. And then for our location, what we can do is get the direction of the surface. Now, how can we do this? Well, what we can do is get the normal and simply make a rotation from X. That way we're getting the normal of the mesh and getting the X, which is the front view, right? And we're simply going ahead and always gonna apply it in the surface. Then leave out destroy and put out release. And now when the enemy hits us, we spawn a little effect. Now it's super small, so let's make this like 3, and it's pretty much like smoke at this point, right? As you can see, it's pretty cool. It's a bit better, made it too big. But on top of that, we could also go ahead and play around with other hits. We also were talking about the wood. So if we put this one on, you can see it's a bit different. And I think this actually looks way better. So maybe let's put this to 1.5. And it actually looks like he's taking our kind of shirt away, right? Almost as if this was the leather. I think it's literally perfect. So on top of this, let's go ahead and make sure that we add some camera shake, okay? So for the camera shake, what we can do is go into the content browser and open up the blueprints folder. And right over here, let's right click and create a new blueprint class. On here, let's click on all classes, and yes, we can go ahead and have more classes to choose from. Again, think of this as presets, so it's easier for you to understand. Now there's one for our camera shake. So let's type camera shake, scroll down, and we can see this legacy camera shake. This is the simplest version of all, so let's select this and name this BP underscore camera shake underscore, and then this will be like the hit. Open this up, and we have all of these options in the details panel. So make sure that you have class default selected. We do not need to apply any code into this blueprint class. This is simply, the parameters that we need to change. So for the duration, let's put in like 0.15, so it's nice and quick. And then let's go ahead and expand the rotation, because we want to rotate the camera and shake it in different axes, right? But not move it really, so it's gonna be better rotation. So let's expand all the different axes, which is X, Y, and Z and all this stuff. And let's play around with the amplitude and frequency. So let's go ahead and put in around 10 and 50, 10, 50, 10, and 50. And then finally, for the initial offset for raw, let's put this on 0, because it simply looks better if the beginning offset is centered, okay? Simply just looks a bit better. So now that we have the camera shake customized, we can go back to the enemy AI, and right after we apply all the damage, we can also go ahead and, just put the camera shake. So we can say play camera shake, and we have this node, which is play while camera shake. And on here, we can simply go ahead and select the BP camera shake underscore hit that we just created. And then for the epicenter, we can simply drag the same impact point that we had for our effect. And there we go. Just make sure that this is the impact point, as you can see. Now the inner radius will be 0, but the outer radius, which is how far this camera shake will go, let's put in around 1000. Just to make sure that it will reach our camera, because it's third person and it's a bit more, far away. Now if we press play and we go to our player, you can see that we have a cool camera shake. Now maybe that's too much. That depends on what you want. We could reduce this to like, maybe 5 and 5 in this one, and leave the bottom axis to be at 10. He missed. There we go. I think that's literally perfect. And of course, you can customize those values as you want, including the duration. That's it. We have a cool little camera shake and hit effect, which is really nice. Now let's go ahead and spice things up in terms of the dash. Right now we have this cool flip, but let's go ahead and add a little sound so it looks a bit better, and also an effect as we just did. So first of all, let's go ahead and open up the third person character. So go into third person blueprint, third person character blueprint, and on the event graph, let's go ahead and find our dash key. So once we press the key, as you might remember, we make sure to only do this once. We play the animation montage, and we go ahead and launch the character forward. And then once the animation is complete, we reset this to once node so we can go ahead and dash again. And this will avoid spamming, right? And on top of that, we have these booleans that as soon as it's complete, it will turn on, and as soon as this begins, it will turn off and on, so that in the animation blueprint, we will not play our jump and falling and all that states, right? So right after we launch the character, what we can do is drag from here and say spawn emitter attached this time. That way we can now go ahead and find our hit, in this case leather, because it's pretty much as we saw just before, kind of like smoke. And let's put the scale to be like 2.5, 2.5, and then 2.5. Let's keep auto destroy on true, put this to auto release, and then we can go ahead and attach this to a component. That way the dash smoke will kind of follow us. So let's attach this to the mesh, and then we can leave everything by default. So if we click compile, press play, and dash, we have this really cool smoke, as you can see, which is amazing. I think it's literally perfect. So with that done, it is time to go ahead and play a little sound. So once again, let's go inside of the audio folder, and right over here, we can import the dash sound, which again will be available in the zip file. So just drag it, and we have this. So let's go ahead and create another meta sound. So each time that we play this, it will be random and it will just feel a bit better. So let's duplicate one of the existing ones, for example, the X hit, and then rename this to be the dash. Open this up, and simply on the wave player, change the sound to be the dash. And now when we play it, each time it's a bit different. Now let's play around with the pitch. So let's put in around -5 and -3. Now let's see how that goes. As you can see, it's more like, dark. But if we put this to be around 3 and 5, or positive numbers, it's more quick, which is going to be a bit better for us. Let's make sure that in the source we have the attenuation, so it will be in 3D. And then for the volume, let's put in like 3. Made it too much. 2? That's perfect. So let's go ahead and close this, go back to the third person character, and right over here, after we spawn the effect, we can go ahead and play a sound at location once again, so it will be in 3D. Let's go ahead and find our ms_dash, and for the location, let's go ahead and just simply get the actual location, because we don't have any impact point or whatever, right? Because this is not a trace. We are simply playing the dash from any point. And now, as you can see, we have a really cool effect going on. Now we can go ahead and of course increase a bit the difference in pitches, so we can put in like, you know, 3 and, you know, 8 or something, right? So there's more difference and looks a bit different. And then on top of that, I'm gonna go to the original dash, and we have some properties. So overall, you can also change the main pitch from here, okay, if you were wanted to do so. But in this case, we have it from the meta sound, which will be better because it's gonna be a bit random each time. But just so you know, we can also change stuff on the original wave asset, right? In terms of volume, pitch, and all that stuff, like the default sound itself, right? Cool. So with that said, we have everything good to go. And for the last gameplay element that we are going to add before we dive into our map, let's go ahead and add some little coins that we need to collect. So in terms of gameplay, these guys will be guarding some coins that we need to collect. So we need to go ahead, go quickly, collect the coin, and dash out before he hits us. Otherwise, he will go ahead and start to push us away from the coin. So let's go ahead and open up our blueprints folder, right click, create a new blueprint class, and create an actor, because this will simply be in the world and it will not move or anything like that. Name this BP_coin and open this up. Alright, so now over here, let's go ahead and make sure that we have a 3D model. Now we will import a cool coin in a second, but just so that we can start working on the coin before we have the model, let's simply add an empty static mesh with like a cube or something like that, or even a sphere. So under components, we can add a static mesh or directly a sphere, whatever you prefer. In this case, let's select static mesh and just rename this to mesh. And now in the details panel, let's select sphere. And let's put in, I mean, we have, for example, this one, which is pretty cool. And let's go ahead and change the scale with a lock on to around 0.3. So it's a bit smaller, compile, save, and boom. So now if we drag the sphere, as you can see, we have it in the world. Now it's a bit too small actually, so let's go ahead and make this like 0.8 maybe. Compile. Yeah, that's actually way better. Now let's make sure that this coin will spin while it's on the ground. So it looks a bit, you know, more fancy. So we can easily do this without any code at all. We could easily make this with blueprints, but there's an easier way to do so, which is by adding a simple component to this blueprint. So if we go ahead and add this rotating movement component, click enter, and then make sure that the rotation rate has a value. As you can see, this will rotate on the z-axis at 180 degrees. So we compile and press play. It's literally spinning in the z-axis, which is really cool. Now it's going a bit too fast, so we can simply lower this value to around, I don't know, maybe 100. Compile, press play. There we go. That looks pretty cool. Now I just noticed the footsteps are slightly too loud. So let's go ahead and open up the MS footstep. And on volume, we could put this to around 0.7 or 0.8, you know? Yeah, now it's just a bit better, you know? Anyway, so we have a cool coin which is spinning. Don't worry, we'll replace the model in a second. But now it's time to be able to go ahead and pick it up. So how do we go ahead and detect if we can pick it up? Well, let's go ahead and add a radius which will act as a trigger, and once we enter in this trigger, so the player enters, we will go ahead and just add this coin into the player. So to do this, let's go ahead and add a new component and search for collision, and let's go ahead and find the sphere collision. Let's go ahead and rename this to trigger. As you can see, it's here. So to make it bigger, what we can do is go to the details panel, and on sphere radius we can increase this to around, I don't know, 110. And now we have this radius. If we scroll down into the collision settings, you can see that we have overlap all dynamic. This means that it will not block the player from going in, but overlap will simply detect what's going in and out, which will be perfect to add, you know, act as a trigger. So if we scroll down, we can see the events, and you can see that we have on component begin overlap. This is simply when something enters on this trigger. So let's add this event, and when something enters on this trigger, we want to check if it's the player, because imagine that the enemy entered. We don't want the enemy to pick up the coin. So let's go ahead and simply check if it's the player. How can we do this? Well, there's multiple ways, but the easiest way is to add a tag. So go ahead and open up the third-person blueprint, go to class defaults, search for tag, and under actor tag, we can just simply add a one. It's gonna be player. Compile, save, close, and now we can simply check if this actor that entered has the tag player. Super easy way to make sure that an actor that is entering is the one that we want to interact with. So we can now add a branch with a, an if statement, and only continue if this is true. Now make sure that you spell this exactly the same as you did in the actor, okay? If it has any space or whatever, it will not work. So with that said, we're gonna simply go ahead and add this into the player and remove it from the world. So first of all, let's go ahead and play a sound at location. And as you can see, we have a bunch of presets. If you don't see this, click on this icon over here and make sure that you have show engine content and show plugin content enabled. And now as you can see, you have access to a bunch of sounds. In this case, the duckable window drop is pretty cool. Duckable window open is pretty cool. And the pickup is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and select the pickup. Then on the location, make sure that we say get actor location. And to make sure that this is in 3D, we're gonna expand this and set the attenuation to be character, as you might remember. And then right after this, we want to go ahead and destroy this actor. So self, right? Because it's gonna be the coin. And now, when I go to this here, we play a little sound and the coin is destroyed, as you can see. So on top of this, we might need to play a little effect. So we go to the realistic effects and go to particles. We have a whole bunch of them. So we have like sparks too, which is kind of cool. And I mean, some of this could work, but many of this are kind of looping too, right? Oh, that's actually cool. Okay, this is probably the best one. The Sparks E, okay? I mean, we have this one too, which is pretty cool. But right now, the Sparks E is the one that I like the most. Now, there's a few others. We could literally get an explosion. Or, we could get some smoke. Which is looking a bit broken right now. Probably because I'm running 5.5. But anyway, so let's go ahead and add the Sparks E. So select this, go back to here. And we need to do this before we destroy the actor. Because if we destroy the coin, well, it doesn't exist anymore, so it cannot execute any more logic, right? It makes sense. So let's go ahead and say spawn emitter location, and this will be the sparks. So a cool trick that we can do is make sure that we have selected the sparks that we want and click on this drop icon. And then for the location, it will be the get actor location and then auto release. And now we can put this to around 2, so it's a bit bigger. Pick this up. Okay, so I see what is going on. So this, first of all, is in a loop and it had some delay. So this particles will not work as good as it could be. Now we have a whole bunch of different ones, so let's see which one works best. Okay, so this destruction metal is actually pretty cool. So it's under destruction and then destruction metals like this. Swap this and this will work way better because it spawns immediately, and there you go. Wow, that actually looks pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. What's up, man? Yeah, but I love the hit effect. It really ended up looking insane. Alright, there we go. So let's make sure that this is an actual coin. So once again, go to Window, Fab, and let's go ahead and make sure to select and search for coin. The price is going to be free. And we have a whole bunch of them. In this case, this one looks pretty cool because it's stylized. And simply drag this to a world. And boom, we have this over here. Now let's make sure that this shines. So to do this, what we can do is double click on the material instance. And if we expand emissive, we can add an emissive color. If we put this to something as yellow and we save, as you can see now it glows. Now it doesn't glow too much. We want it to glow even more. So to do this, let's double click on the parent. And we have this parent. Let's double click on this parent once again. And we have now this. Now, where is this crazy material coming from? Oh my god. Well, if we if we go to search, as you can see, it's an engine plugin. So that means that we don't really want to modify this over here. So the best option is to create our own material to make sure that things are just easy. So right click, new material, m_coin, open this up, and on the base color, simply putting a yellowish color like this, and then hold 3 in your keyboard and press the left mouse button, and then do the same over here. And simply multiply this pin with a number, and this will be the light intensity. Let's put in like 5, and then plug this to emissive color, and also this to the base color, you know. And now, as you can see, this shines quite a lot. So if I go to the coin and I swap the coin material to the M coin that I just created, as you can see, it's more shiny, which looks pretty cool. And we can even put the roughness to be like 0.2, so it will even shine just a bit. Alright, so with that said, let's delete this coin from the level and open up the coin blueprint. So select this, Ctrl E, viewport, select the mesh, and on here, let's search for coin and select the coin. And then make sure this is a bit bigger, so 1.5 perhaps with a lock on. And there we go. As you can see, it spins and everything like that, which is really cool. Wow, amazing, right? Now, we can pick up coins, but of course, we can't go ahead and see how many coins we have, you know, collected. So it is time to go ahead and create a UI. So in the content browser, let's right click and create a new folder, call this UI, and open this up. In this new folder, let's right click, scroll down until we see the user interface section and create a widget blueprint. Select user widget, which is the simpler class, and then call this .ub for widget blueprint, underscore, and then something as coins, and open this up. So in this widget, what we can do is add images, text, icons, UI, and whatever you want. So the first thing that we need to add in the palette is the canvas panel. So search for canvas, drag this into the hierarchy over here. As you might remember, the hierarchy is the list of all of the, you know, and there's in the level actors, and on the widget just kind of components, right, or whatever icons and images you have. And the palette is simply like a huge library of things that you can drag into. For example, I could drag a progress bar or things like that, right? So once we have our canvas, we can start to place things on our screen, and of course this canvas represents our screen. So this is going to be super simple. We're going to simply drag a text onto the, you know, top left, for example. Or actually, let's do it on, yeah, let's do the top left, and then we can simply resize this a bit. So let's go ahead and put this over here. Maybe make this a bit bigger because it's a bit too small. So under font, we can put this to be maybe like, you know, 25, 28, or even 30. Yeah, 30 looks pretty cool. And then we can simply change the color and opacity, and just change the color to be kind of more bluish. And then pretty much just add, you know, yeah, just like this. We can outline things like that, but it looks cool. Now this text is here, so let's make sure that when we press play, we see the UI. So to add a widget into our player, we need to go into the third-person character blueprint, and we need to do this through code. So basically what we can do is go to the begin play, which is when the game starts. In this case, we don't have a begin play, so let's right click, add a begin play, and there we go. So when the game starts, what we can do is call this node to create a widget. And then we need to choose what widget. Well, it's going to be the coins one that we created. Now this widget will create, but we are not telling it to add it to the screen. So we can simply get the return value, which is an output, and essentially this is the widget. And we can go ahead and say add to viewport, and this will add it to the player screen. So if I press play, boom, you can see that we have the text block over there. Now it's blocking, there we go, it was blocking this widget, but now it's here. Now make sure on the widget that the anchors are on this top left part, okay, of the screen. Otherwise it would just position it incorrectly. Now we are actually gonna go ahead and change this to be at the top right, so that this icon when I press play doesn't appear, okay? That's up to you, but I'm gonna simply click on anchors, put this on the top right, put this position on y and x to 0, and then put the position x to 1, actually, sorry, 2 minus 1. Sorry, the alignment, sorry, to 1. There we go. And then we can also put this on -1 for x, so it's here. But I think -0.5 will be pretty cool. And then 1.5. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then we can scroll down and put the justification to here. And now it's just centered over here, as you can see. Now maybe we can put the alignment more like here. And we can put in a text such as, you know, coins, like 10 coins. There you go. Boom, we have 10 coins. Now that's still too small. So in the font, we can put in like 50 and resize this. And that's a bit better. As you can see, we have 10 coins. So now we of course need to update this text over here. So how can we do this? Well, we can just go to third person character blueprint, break this return value with alt, right click, promote this to a variable, and this will be the coins widget. So we are saving the new widget in a variable. Make sure to connect this into here, so we'll add it to the viewport, okay? So now that we have the new widget in a variable, we can, you know, access this widget at any time. So simply, let's right click over here and create a new custom event and name this add coin. And now what we can do is get the coins widget and access our text. So in order to access our text, we need to go ahead and rename this to something as coins text. And then make sure that it's set as is variable on the details panel. That way we can see it and access it as a variable from outside. So now in the third person character, I can drag from here and say get text. And here we are, get coins text. And then I can simply say set text and use this bottom function and apply whatever text I want. So what I can do is have a coins counter. So I can simply add a new variable named coins. This will be an integer, and an integer is essentially just a regular number. And then what I can do is simply get coins and call this function, which is add increment int. So it will simply add 1 every time that we collect a coin. And then simply the text can be the amount of coins that I have. Now this works. If I press play, of course, by default we have 10 because of the text, but if I pick this up, nothing happens. Why? Well, this is because we need to go ahead and make sure that we call this event, because right now nothing is called in this event. So let's go ahead and open up our coin with Ctrl E, and now over here what we can do is simply access the actor and do something with it. Now usually you could go ahead and just say cast to third person character, as we did with the animation blueprint, because as you might remember, we don't know what this actor is. Like, we know it's an actor, but not what class it is, so we cannot access its properties. I cannot go here and say get mesh, because, you know, we don't know if this actor has a mesh. If we say cast to third person character, we're saying, okay, is this character, right, that is entering the trigger this class? If so, we can now access all the things as get mesh or get the coins, right, and do things with them. But this takes some memory because, well, we need to go ahead and allocate memory to them. And an easier way to do this, and well, not easier, that's actually the easier way, but a better way to do this so memory is a bit more efficient is creating an interface. So if we go to the blueprints folder, we can right click, go to the blueprint section and create a blueprint interface. And right over here we can name this BBI for blueprint interface underscore and then something as coins. If we open this up, we can go ahead and create a new function. So let's go ahead and rename this to add coin. And now leave everything as it is. If we compile and save, we don't need to add any code. This simply just adds functions. We can go to third person character, go to class settings, and in the implemented interface, we can search for a coins interface and add this. Okay, so this means that I can delete this custom event and add the interface event that I created. Okay, so now we have this event through this interface, and we didn't really change anything of the code. So this means that now I can go to the coin blueprint and simply get the actor that entered, and I can say add coin. And you can see, wow, it actually found the function that is in the player. But we are not casting, so how is this possible? Well, the thing is that interfaces do not require casting. That's the beauty about them, so we can use this interface with whatever enemy we want, whatever player we want, and it will simply work. And it's just better for, you know, memory and just more efficient. So this means that now when I collect the coin, it turns into 1 because I have 1 coin. So we need to make sure to do 2 things. First of all, we need to go to the third-person character blueprint and make sure that in the text it says coins at the end. So we can use this by saying format text, and then here typing squiggly bracket amount end of squiggly bracket space and then coins. That way we are creating an input for the amount, and this will be this. And then we need to also go to the widget and set this to be 0 by default. And now when I press play, we have 0 coins. When I go here, we have 1 coin, and still the number has also the text of coins, and it looks really, really cool. So one thing that we can do, of course, is spice things up with an outliner actually. So let's go ahead and put this to line 3 and put the color to be also kind of like this. Maybe even make the size a bit bigger. So maybe like 80. Yes, this looks pretty cool. Whoa. Maybe a bit too big, not gonna lie. Let's put in, yeah, and well, 50 was good. You can play around with the, I have a 4K monitor, that's why, but you can play around with the size, you know? But there we go, we can go ahead and collect coins and everything like that. And just before we jump in with our map, let's go ahead and add a cool, you know, kind of hat into our character. So let's go up into window, fab, and simply let's search for hat, okay? Let's put the price to free, and boom, we have this hat, which is really cool. So simply drag this to the world, and we have a cool hat over here, right? So let's go ahead and make our material because it's kind of bugged in terms of transparency. So let's Ctrl Shift S to save everything, right click, new material, m_hat, open this up, and simply drag this texture into here. And now we can simply drag this into the base color, and then click on the graph and set the blend mode to be masked, and then the alpha will be to opacity mask. That way we have the alpha channels and the hat will have the little holes, you know. And then open up the mesh and change this to the new hat material, which is m hat, which is this one, okay, which is under fab hat cabello. There we go. Now it looks insane, right? There we go. Now let's also open up the texture and let's make it a bit more vibrant. So scroll down, put the brightness to 2, and then saturation to 1.5. That way it's more like cartoony, you know? As you can see. This is really cool. So with that said, let's go ahead and add it into the character. As you might remember, we do this with sockets. So characters, villagers, open up the skeleton, and let's find the head socket as we want to attach it to the head. So right click on this and add a new socket and rename this new socket to hat. Now, so it's easier to move this socket around. Let's right click on this new socket of hat and add a preview asset and search for hat. Boom. Move this up and now start to go ahead and move this around. So let's go ahead and rotate this around 90 degrees and then 180. And then simply start to play around with the scale. So maybe 2 will work. Okay, that's a bit too big. Maybe 1.5, 1.5, 1.5. And kind of just start to maybe rotate this a bit like this. Yeah, I kind of like this, okay? I think this looks pretty cool. So again, you can copy my positions. Maybe it's a bit more, yes. All right, so you save, close, and when we press play, we don't have the hat. Yes, because we still need to add the mesh. Right now, this is a socket which has a preview asset, so it's easier to place, right? So we go to the third person character blueprint, go to viewport, we can select the mesh and add a new static mesh as a child, okay? This will be the hat, and now we can simply find the hat over here. Now, because this hat is a child, okay, of this mesh, which is our character, we can attach it to one of the parent sockets, which is hat. And that's it. Make sure that the collision is set to no collision. And when we press play, boom, we have a really cool little hat over here. And of course, our enemy AI doesn't have the hat, so it looks perfectly fine. And now, yes, it is finally time to create our map and environment. So for this, we need to import some cool, environment assets that we will use to build our own custom map. So let's go up into window and open up once again Fab. And over here, let's search for stylized flying CD. And then simply go ahead and filter the price on free. And we find this one over here, which includes some really cool assets, as you can see. So let's click on add to project and then choose the closest Unreal version, which is in this case 4.27. And don't worry, this will work just fine, okay? So just click on add to project and Unreal Engine will make sure that it's compatible with our version of 5.5, okay? And it's nearly there. And boom, there we go. We close this, we now have a new folder called Stylized Flying CD with a lot of meshes and a map. Now I'm gonna quickly open the map so you can see how it looks, but of course we are not going to be using this map, okay? We are gonna create our own, but just as you can see, it looks really cool. I mean, this is even built in Unreal Engine 4, right? In an old version, not even Unreal Engine 5, so imagine how this will look with Lumen. So with that said, it's time to go ahead and create a new level. Alright, to create a new map in Unreal, we need to go up into File, New Level, and we have a couple of presets to select with. In this case, let's select Empty Level, hit Create, and there we go. We have an empty level. So first of all, let's make sure that we have some skylight, additional light, and some clouds. So we can do this easily by going up into Window and clicking on Environment Light Mixer. And now we can start to click all of these buttons in this order. And boom, we have a beautiful skylight. There we go, in 2 seconds. So let's go ahead and press Ctrl-Shift-S to save everything, including the level. Let's go to Content, scroll down until we see Third Person, Maps, and then let's go ahead and just rename this to kind of whatever map you want. In this case, let me just call it Map. There we go, so the level is now saved. So now it is time to create a landscape. So how do we create a landscape? Well, we go up into the selection mode and change this to be the landscape mode. And as you can see, we have a preview of how this landscape would look. In this case, everything by default will work just fine. So let's go ahead and make sure that we have enable edit layers enabled. The materials is empty for now, but we'll change it a bit later. And then all of this by default. And now hit create, and boom, we have a beautiful landscape to work with, which is really cool. So we go back to the selection mode and press play. We spawn with our player and we can walk around. But let's make sure that we add a player start so our player starts in the correct place. So we go to the quickly add to the project section. We go into all, and if we hover over this list, we can search for player start by just typing and drag this into the world. And then we can click on this icon to center this, rotate this 180 degrees, move it up, press End on your keyboard to snap to the ground, and then move it a bit backwards, and that's it. Now make sure that the game mode is applied, because maybe for some of you guys when you press play, you don't have this character. So in the world settings of this level, simply go to game mode override and select this to the third person game mode. Save again, press play, and boom, we're good to go. So now it's time to bring this world to life, because right now it's a bit empty, right? So it's finally time to start to use some of this, materials and meshes that came with the stylized pack. Now, for this world, we're gonna make it pretty simple, and we're gonna have a path in a street with a lot of houses and some enemies over there guarding some coins. So, to create a path, there's many ways in Unreal. The first way is to just go ahead and find, for example, this ground mesh, or this one, which is a bit longer, and then place this over here and start to duplicate it and slowly build a path, right? I mean, this will work. We have built a path in 2 seconds, but of course it will take a bit of time. So there is an easier way to do this with splines, and it's built in with Unreal Engine landscape tools. So we go up into the selection mode, we can change this to the landscape mode, and then what we can do is go to manage and create a new layer. So our landscapes will be always organized into different layers. But if we go ahead and add a new layer, we can specify what type of layer. In this case, we want a layer of splines. Select splines, select, and boom, we have created a new layer, as you can see, and the spline tool is automatically selected. So now if we go into our world, we hover over our world and hold left control and left click, boom, we add the first point. I can go to the next point, hold left control and click, and boom, I start creating my world, as you can see. So now it's basically just time to click more with left control and simply create a cool world. And if I move this up, as you can see, the environment will adapt into it, which is quite cool, as you can see. This is quite amazing. And there we go. So slowly we go ahead and build our world. But of course, right now this path is invisible when I press play, because we don't have any meshes attached. This is only a preview. So click on segments on this button, and this will automatically go ahead and detect and select all of the kind of paths. And what we can do is in the details panel, scroll down until we see spline meshes. And what we can do is add a new mesh to spawn in this spline. So if we go to our stylized flying city, meshes, and scroll down until we see this ground 01, if we drag it in, boom. As you can see, the path starts to build. But there's a problem, okay? We're having this kind of, interconnections every so often. Why is that? Well, this is simply because our mesh has that on the borders. So what we need to do is make sure that we remove this border so it will merge perfectly. So how do we do this? Well, let's go back to the selection mode, save everything, and drag this ground 01 to a world. And now what we can do is go up into the selection mode and select the modeling mode. And yes, in Unreal we can also have like a mini blender where we can essentially edit models, which is really cool. So as you can see, we have multiple tools over here, but the one that we are looking for is the plane cut under model. Select this and everything disappears. So let's go ahead and hover over the green kind of circle and rotate this 90 degrees. Okay, you can see it there. Simply move this to one of the edges. So just over here. And make sure to break it right on the corner where the, kind of edge here starts to appear. So we just straight up finish straight. Click on accept, and that's it. Let's do it one more time for this place. So click on plane cut, and then rotate it but through the other way. So this time it will be minus 90 degrees. Then move it. Oh, sorry, we need to do it again like this. There you go. So actually now it will be 90. There we go, instead of minus 90. So it's the other side, right? And we go ahead, make sure to start right here. Okay, so we click on accept, and there we go. We have a path which is essentially all together, and boom, as you can see, this fixed the road. It's essentially merging perfectly. So we can go ahead and delete this, Ctrl Shift S, go back to our landscape mode, and click on segments, because we need to do a little change, which is on the spline meshes to disable scale with width. That way the path will be more narrow, and when we press play, it fits better the character's scale, and it will look better in a stylized way. So with that done, it's time to go ahead and spice things up with, for example, a little landscape material. So let's go ahead and select the landscape and then scroll down, and then on the material, let's search for generic 4 and select this. Now as you can see, the material is very small and it's repeating the texture all over again, so the tiling is very bad. As you can see, it looks like a grid. So double click to open this up, and let's right click and add a texture coordinate, okay? And then simply plug this to all of the UVs, and with this now selected, put this value of tiling 2.3 on both parameters. And now, as you can see, it's way bigger and it looks nicer. So with that done, it is time to go ahead and make sure that we start to add some of the houses. So there's a few ways that we can do this, but the best way is to manually place them for this little path, you know? So let's go and open up this stylized flying city, open up meshes, and now we have a whole bunch of, you know, assets that we can choose from. In this case, we have houses, which are gonna be perfect. So what we can do is kind of start around, I'm gonna start actually here, right? So I'm gonna move the player start to here, and I'm gonna simply start to drag some houses. So for example, let's put in this house with this separation. Let's go ahead and drag, you know, for example, I don't know, this one. We have a B, which is kind of different with a balcony, but I like this one. And then kind of rotate this to orient this with the road, okay? We can maybe put this to 5, so a bit, there we go, better. Kind of this separation is good, I think. Then we can drag, for example, this one and kind of place it over here with a bit of tilt, so it looks more stylized, more kind of out of the place. We could drag, for example, this one and rotate this kind of like this, you know. We could get this huge thing and kind of put it over here. There we go, and kind of build, you know, the road and the street. Maybe we can join a bit more, you know, because it will kind of fill more the edges. But you get the idea. We start to build our path, which is pretty cool. We can do the same with the other side of the road. So I could get this house, rotate it, put this around here, and then simply get this house, for example, or even this one, but put it like this, and then get this one, and then this one. Kind of the same process, you know, but a bit of separation, you know. So maybe yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like this. And then we can put this one. Oh, actually, yeah, this this should be rotated, right? So yeah, so the door is here. There we go. Yeah, it's basically just repetition, you know, at this point, really. For example, this one, and we start to have a cool city, as you can see. Let's go ahead and also change up the first of all, the player start, move it up. As you can see, it says bad size, it was colliding with the ground. And then if we press Ctrl L, we can go ahead and move the sun, right? So in this case, we can bring it more down, bring them up. I mean, it depends on what you're looking for with a mouse, but I like how this looks right now, okay? And yeah, I mean, this is simply just continuing pretty much, just creating more of the path. So, you know, for example, I could put this more here and start to duplicate all this, right? So I can simply start to, you know, I don't know, get this one. So that all this with Shift, hold Alt, and duplicate this, and move this to here. And simply realign it with the road, and that's it. So you can spend as much time as you want with this level. I'm just making something quick, and we can do the same over at this side. Select all the, hold Alt, and move this around. And then simply realign all of these houses. We can also change this to the local world, right? So it's easier to move around. But yeah, this process is pretty much just spending some time moving things around. And that's it, you know. And then on here we need to move them up because of course we have the hill. Can we do like this? All right. And as you can see, we have a cool little CD that we can walk around, and I mean it's looking pretty cool. We can maybe make this a bit more like this. Yeah, it looks pretty cool, right? So really, it's now also going ahead and making sure that the lighting is correct and all this stuff. But there's one thing that I want to add, which is some grass over here. So, you know, spice things up, right? So on window, click on fab, and now we can go up into the search and search for ribbon with 2 B's grass. And simply go ahead and click on add to project with a medium quote. And boom, we have it in our project. There we go. So we can click on foliage types, and these are the ones that we can paint. So if we go ahead and go into the foliage mode, we can select all of this and drag them to the ones that we want to paint. And we select all of these ones that are added into the collection, we can tick them and then simply start to paint. So I'm gonna go ahead and make sure to disable static meshes so I don't paint on top of the houses. And then I'm gonna change the density to 200. And then I'm gonna change the scaling to uniform and between, you know, 2 and 2.5. And now when I paint, we have this really cool grass, as you can see. So this really is painting on some of the edges. Doesn't need to be all of them, but just in the places where there's more of a gap, you know. So kind of here, really in between houses. This is what I would suggest. This is the same with the other part over here. Make sure that there's not inside of the houses. Kind of here. Kind of here. And then with shift, you go ahead and remove grass, okay? With left shift. So it's kind of just playing around and adding and removing, you know? Okay, I like this. There we go. There we go. There we go. And yeah, we're having a pretty cool world, as you can see, with grass. This one is hopping in, so we can decrease this and boom, shift. There we go. Yeah, I mean, we could also paint some of them over here. It looks pretty cool, but I prefer to keep it more clean and more like deserty with sand. So maybe we can add it just a bit, you know, in some cases, like just here, just a bit. I don't know, just here, just a bit. You know, just here, just a bit, and just go ahead and balance out the grass. Now let's go ahead and make sure that the grass is a bit more, you know, stylized. So what we can do is open up the texture. Now there's 2 textures. Let's open up both of them and put this to be like 2 of brightness, and then the saturation on 1.5. Save and close. And for the billboards, let's also do this. And that's it. So you can see they're more like stylized and it looks pretty cool. Last but not least, let's go ahead and add in the visual effects a post-processing. As you can see, this is a box. So the post-processing will allow us to change some things as color grading, exposure, and some kind of just cool lighting settings. But of course, it's a bit hard to go ahead and expand this box to fill the whole level. So this is a cool thing to do, which is to search infinite under the details panel and just enable infinite. And now this will go ahead and expand and affect the whole world, and it doesn't need to be, you know, filled in with this box. So on exposure, we can go ahead and put in like, you know, -5 and 5, and then under color grading in global, I can enable saturation, put this to 0.05, and then contrast 1.05. And now we have some really cool vibrant colors, as you can see, which is really great. Now maybe the character is too plasticky, as you can see, so this is a quick change that we can do. So we can go to characters, villager, body, and in the roughness we can times this by simply something as 0.5. That way it will have half of the strength. Actually, sorry, so roughness is the other way around. The more you have, the less rough it is, so less shiny it is. So let's put in like times 1.5. That way is the other effect. It will make it less. There we go. It looks quite cool. So yeah, we have a really cool character over here going on, and we can walk around in our beautiful world and just play our game. Now let's add one important thing to our level, which is spice things up, which is high fog. So we select the high fog, we can go ahead and scroll down and enable volumetric fog. This is going to just make things look 10 times better. And then I can just put the fog density to 1. Well, that's too much. Maybe just a bit more. And now as you can see, this looks way nicer, right? And it's pretty cool because we feel that the city is filled in. Now you can also play around with the lighting in game, and you press F8, Ctrl L, and then maybe change the angle, and then go back to play mode and see if that's better. You know, it's really up to you, but once you escape play mode, it goes back to normal. And now it's time to go ahead and add our enemies in certain corners. So let's go ahead and just open up the blueprints folder and then find some cool spots. So in this case, our character spawns over here. So maybe we kind of want to have an enemy under here. So we can put an enemy here and have a coin just besides him. There we go. Now of course the enemy right now will not move because it doesn't have enough mesh, remember? So we just need to go to the volumes and add a nav mesh bounce volume. And this one doesn't have an infinite option like the post-processing, so we need to kind of just make sure that this is filled in. And just make this big, and then press P, and we can see all the possible paths, and that's actually perfect. So now yes, when I press play and I approach my enemy, he will see me and he will go to me. I can pick up the coin, and there we go, I have the coin. This is so cool. And then we can continue on our journey, you know? So let's add a bit more over here. So I'm gonna just select both, hold Alt to move them, and put in another one like here. Press Enter in my keyboard so they snap, but then put the coin to be a bit higher because I don't want the coin to be in the ground. And then what I can do on top of this is get, for example, this building and make sure that the city and the street kind of ends over here, you know? And then I can have like this yellow one here. There we go, it looks quite nice. So we have a cool game, guys. I mean, we can go here, can dash. And that's it, guys. Now you have completed your first game in Unreal Engine 5. From here you can go ahead and expand your game by adding new enemies, new weapons, expanding the map, and so on. If you found this tutorial helpful, I would really appreciate it. You could like the video and subscribe to my channel. Join my huge Discord server with over 10,000 game developers to be involved in the best conversations, and remember that you can download the complete project through Patreon or YouTube members. The link is in the description. And now yes, with all that said, bye bye.